So imagine you're talking to a friend, and out of nowhere, a wave of nausea hits you. You attempt to brush it off, thinking it's just a little bit of nausea, but then your heart starts pounding really fast. Feels like your heart's heavy, almost like it's trying to escape your own body. Each breath you take feels harder to pull in, like the air around you is really thick, and it's hard to breathe. Your eyes start to swell with tears, and you start debating, are you having a panic attack or is something else wrong? You start to overheat, you're sweating, and gravity feels really, really strong, almost like it's doubled. The longer you stand, the weaker you become, until parts of your body are just numb. And it starts to feel like all the strength and life is just being drained out of your body. Your vision starts to flicker, and all you see is a dark tunnel. It keeps opening and closing. Your head starts to feel detached and weightless, and you feel like you're slipping out of your own body. And at the peak of everything goes pitch black. This is what an average episode of POTS can feel like, losing control of your own body, while the world around you keeps moving. But this isn't rare for me. It's my reality. I got diagnosed with a chronic illness called POTS this summer, and since then, my life has changed completely, and it really taught me how quickly life can change. Easy things I used to be able to do start to become impossible. Simple things like going upstairs were a challenge now. And trying to deal with diagnosis was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. For me, my physical health isn't about eating anymore or doing exercise. It's about whether I can go up the stairs without feeling dizzy, or whether I faint at the store when I'm just standing in line. And after diagnosis, it felt like my body was just constantly working against me. And there was no really definite reason why. When I first got diagnosed, I was told there was no cure. And that's something no 15-year-old girl wants to hear. Medically, the only options I had were to take medicine to try and, manage my heart rate. Other than that, I was told to drink water, lots of it, drink electrolytes, wear compression socks, anything I could to just minimize the symptoms, but it was never going to fully go away. And last but not least, I was told to listen to my body, to try and understand it. But how was I supposed to listen to my body when I barely knew what was going on? Every symptom I had just felt like a mystery. And I had to experience it all just to figure out my limits. It's almost like a glow stick has to break in order to glow. But I wasn't glowing. And sometimes even just feeling everything wasn't enough. So having to navigate all these symptoms in my mind, having to deal with all these different patterns, having to manage everything in my head, it made my life super complicated as a teenage girl. Once I realized that my life was constantly changing and I was just continuing to experience stuff, I couldn't go into this blindly anymore. So I started to do some research on POTS as an attempt to understand myself. I learned that a lot of the symptoms can be dizziness, severe fatigue, shortness of breath, muscle weakness, blood pooling, numbness in your legs, nausea, brain fog, vision issues, struggles concentrating, high heart rate, chest pain, and fainting. And there's way more. I realized that so many of the symptoms I had daily were all a part of my chronic illness. So the struggle of eating and feeling nauseous, no matter what I ate, what I did, how much I ate, wasn't normal. It was just a symptom of my chronic illness. I wasn't being lazy or making stuff up. It was just my body trying its best to function properly. And I realized that POTS is so much more than just dizziness. There's days where your body just hurts, you feel dizzy, and you feel sore for no reason. I remember there was a day I hadn't done exercise in like a month, and the next day I felt like I had lifted 3 cars. So living with POTS so far has taught me that my body is like an obstacle course. Even simple tasks become challenges. And even if I did all the right steps, like pacing myself, going to the doctor when I needed to, drinking a lot of fluids, doing everything I was told to do, I still had days that were worse than others. Chronic illness doesn't have an off switch. It doesn't. Even good days come with symptoms. You always feel something. And on those days, it's not just my body that suffers, it's my mind holding the weight of everything. You feel every episode, every dizzy spell, every symptom, and the feeling of having to hold yourself back. Now, imagine waking up with just 10 spoons in the morning. Here are the spoons. These spoons represent all the energy you have in a day. So for most people, stuff like climbing stairs, standing in line, or even getting ready in the morning takes like 1 spoon. And most people, most of you guys, can probably get through the day without even having to think about it. However, with those of us with chronic illness, energy isn't endless. We measure it in spoons. And each task, like getting out of bed, or talking to friends, or even just doing simple tasks, can take 2 to 3 spoons. Once my spoons are gone, there's no refills, there's no extra energy, there's nothing else you can do. I'm done. I'm done for the day. And mostly at the end of the day, all of my spoons are gone. That's the spoon theory, which was invented by Christine Musardino. And it was showed and made to describe how chronic illness isn't just physical. It drains you emotionally, mentally, socially, and in all aspects of health there are. So when I was first diagnosed, I was told the words, "There's no cure." And that hit me harder than anything. Because suddenly my whole life became about dealing with something that I couldn't escape from, I couldn't heal, I couldn't cure, I couldn't fight off. And sometimes I guess you could say I felt like a broken mirror, shattered into pieces that could never really be fully fixed again. And I started to grieve the version of myself that I'm never gonna get back. And that's when I realized chronic illness takes so much away from you. Your motivation, your spark, and it slowly chips away at who you are as a person. So I went from having goals, thinking about the future, wanting to be a pilot, to then being told that wasn't a possibility, to just struggling to get out of bed. And that's never something I thought would happen to me at the age of 15. So having to spend a day in the nurse's office or needing extra help or time with assignments left me feeling so guilty. I avoided going to the doctor at school. I tried to avoid help. I've had teachers force me to go to the doctor because I didn't want to go. And the main thing was I didn't want people to think I was skipping work or I was trying to skip school on purpose. Because in a way, that's kind of what it felt like. And every time I felt like bad or I had to go to the doctor, I just felt like I was letting everyone down. Like I wasn't strong enough to just push through the symptoms and go through a day. But moreover, I started distancing myself from the people I really cared about, including my family. Not on purpose, but just because it was the only way I could pretend like I wasn't struggling with anything. I would always say I was fine after fainting or after having an episode or after something happening in my life. But I wasn't fine. The more I acted unaffected, the more I started to build this mask. As a strong person who wasn't affected by anything, who was doing great and wasn't struggling, who was handling everything really well. And in doing so, I started to block out how much I was really struggling, how much I was really suffering. If I distanced myself or hid my real struggles, I started to think that maybe it would just all stop one day. Because if I didn't, I realized I had to accept what was really going on. And I couldn't bring myself to do that. Couldn't accept that this was going to be my life from now on. So I wasn't there for those I cared about. And there's part of that was just because I couldn't feel like I could be there for them, but also because I was barely present in my own life. There are patches in my memories from days that I really don't remember because brain fog was one of the main symptoms of POTS that really affected me. My energy was really inconsistent. I was either too much one day or not enough another day. And I couldn't stand that my struggles were going to start affecting those I cared about. So over time, I built a wall. I've always been considered a really closed-off person, but this wall was thicker than the ones previously. And it was kind of to protect myself, mostly from reality, but also from others from the weight I was really carrying. So researching POTS for this TED Talk and also coming here to talk today was one of the hardest things I've done. I struggled to kind of read symptoms and percentages about everything that was really going on. Because with each fact, I realized how real everything really was. I realized how real my symptoms were. I wasn't making this up, it was actually my reality. And that made me really scared, vulnerable, and overwhelmed. But beyond my story, students with chronic illnesses face similar challenges. According to the CDC, about 5.8% of students have around 15 or more days of absence just because of chronic illness. And they're 3.6 times more likely to face challenges, especially with academics, because of chronic illness. Not only this, but being a teenager with chronic illness was something really hard to accept because most people don't get diagnosed until they're adults. 87% of people that are kind of, I guess, diagnosed with chronic illness are adults, and only 13% are children and teenagers. So I was lucky enough to have a doctor who listened to me, someone who diagnosed me immediately, but there's so many people, especially in the US, I've heard stories of people who had to take 10 years until they were able to get diagnosed. 10 years not knowing if they were making something up or if they were actually struggling with something. Because doctors didn't listen to them. They were told it was anxiety, that it was going to go away, just to take some ibuprofen. Furthermore, this causes a lot of students, especially teenagers, to feel isolated, anxious, or guilty, because no one really understands what you're going through other than you. Chronic illness doesn't just affect your body, it starts to affect your identity, your confidence, your mental health, your connections to the world around you. And it hurts in ways people can't really see. It starts to steal your motivation, your energy. And you wait for the day where you forget what it's like to be healthy. And that's terrifying. But I learned that even though you lose so much in the process, it's almost like an opportunity for self-discovery. Maybe it was my opportunity to learn self-love. I wish I could stand up here and say since I've started this TED Talk to now, or since the summer now, I'm doing completely okay, not struggling with anything, doing great. But I can't, because I was just recently diagnosed. And I still struggle on a daily basis, having to manage symptoms, having to miss school, having to not really be able to live my life fully. And sometimes thinking long term of how long this could last. I mean, it could be 5 years. They said I could grow out of it, or it could be lifelong. And in a way, that thought is really terrifying. And it's stressful. Because no matter what you do, there's nothing else you can do at some points. No matter if you take the medicine, if you do everything you're told, sometimes there's just nothing else they can do for you. So even though that I am diagnosed, that doesn't mean I'm cured. And this is the start of a really long journey. But going back to the mirror reference, I started to learn that I can't fully ever get back the old version of myself. I can't fully repair that mirror. But maybe it's the way I can start to reflect a new version of myself. Thank you.